Right, welcome. Thank you very much for invitation. I've got a homecoming as well because I used to be involved in the dark and murky past with the Pavilion Internet. Some of you might remember that. We merged with that company at, I think, 97, 98, so I was here quite a lot, and it was such a joy to see the growth and incredible excitement coming out of the digital Brighton, and I think it really is. It's just once in my lifetime, it's not hype. So my story, I'm Eva Pascoe, so I was very, very lucky to get involved with a bunch of people doing the first internet cafe, but I migrated from there. From 1994, we opened the first internet cafe in Good Street in London. So I kind of did the omni-channel before it actually happened. So we had the digital and the physical and the coffee. As it turned out, the best business was the coffee, but I wasn't that interested in coffee, so I missed out on Starbucks and Cafe Nero, because I think we were like 6 years before them. So if you're setting up a business, it will never pan out to be what you think it will be. Pivot, pivot, and pivot. And after I managed somehow to escape from the digital high street, I've been invited to set up Topshop, the first e-commerce for fashion in UK. And spent quite a few years doing that because it was about 5 years before Tesco. So we were really the people who were teaching women how to shop online, and it was quite hard work because it was very slow and painful. So I've done a lot of painful. So now when we're coming to the beacons, they're painful as well, but I'll tell you in what way. But I learned a lot, and I learned a lot also how people get over the technology dislike, because I think it's still the average attitude technology that is big pain and a faff. So how do we get off the pain and a faff into something useful? Hopefully we can cover that. The reason why I got interested in Internet of Things is because we're living in the cities which are just growing very, very rapidly with less and less money to run them. So it's pretty damn obvious that technology has got to be the way out of it, because otherwise it will become very unpleasant. So if you just look at London, it's been growing like crazy, but I think Brighton is on the very similar growth path, and we have less money to manage. So we looked at Internet of Things with a population growth perspective, because it's really weird. Everybody's coming, but nobody's shopping. So the more people, the less open shops. The more population, the less profitable the shops are. So I kind of thought, this is really not adding up, what's going on? So we started digging for the data, and the data is showing pretty awful stuff. So basically the trend is away from the high street. We have over 25 shops boarded up for more than 3 years. They're mainly owned by our pension funds, so our money is not working particularly hard because they let the shops being boarded up instead of dropping the rent. That's another story. But we got together with a few people who were retailers, and a couple of years ago, I did this Bill Grimsey review, which was kind of against Murray Porter's putting flowers on the streets and hoping that that will do. We were moving towards looking at technology as a solution. So we did quite a lot of digging around, particularly with Tesco, which was just coming off the cliff but didn't know that. And that was quite exciting because we could see that having all this data doesn't actually make you a good business. So that's worth bearing in mind. They had all the data in the world and they still missed little. But as we moved on, we realized actually that there isn't really data about the high street. It's very, very scampy. It's usually inaccurate, and it's years out of date. So what we found is a lovely technology company called Local Data Company, which actually gathers data on the vacancies by clipboards and housewives. And that is the best data in town. And it's the most accurate because they actually have people every day pounding the high streets and making the notes, in, out, what's closed, what's open. So this data set is the best in town, but this closed data set is very expensive. We managed to play and kind of shift the provision of that data to Wi-Fi, because we realized that this housewives, actually, they all had Wi-Fi. They didn't need the clipboard, so that was one thing we helped. But we also realized that there is data kind of waiting to be collected. We have the mobiles, and we have the beacons. You can come and talk to me about it in detail, but it's all kind of moving from static to real time. So we had bad data in a static format. We might get better data in real-time format. So we're actually looking really at a big boost to what we know about high street and what retailers know about what do. So I sort of planned it for you in terms of, this is a very useful slide actually, because it took us a long time to get there, and this is one worth printing out because everything is here. Your 5 years of digital adventure is here. It took me 15 years to get to that slide, so take it. So we're working with these little things, which are just absolutely gorgeous, and retailers love them. For good and wrong reasons, we get to that in a minute, but they do love them, so that's a good start. But what actually is providing the information, after discovering the clipboard and the housewives and moving them to Wi-Fi, we actually decided that what's needed is a really, really accurate footfall counter, which can be placed in the shops in the front, so you can measure the footfall outside and inside. The privacy aspect of it is way beyond hairy. So we're also running a campaign with retailers to actually make sure that they understand the concept of anonymization. That concept is hairy as well, but that's another conference. But somehow or other, I think this data is useful. So these are little devices which don't cost much. You can stick them pretty much everywhere, and they basically can calculate, not accurately, because they only count people with smartphones who had the location on, and that's only a subset of people, but you get a baseline, so that's handy. So you want data? Here's the data. So what does it actually mean? We discovered all sorts of hairy stuff. So in terms of the vacancies, some places are amazing. I think Brighton is actually one of the best places in terms of shops. The vacancy is very low. It's about 4%. But it has been over 15%, so it comes and goes. But the worst places have been noted about nearly 30% closed shops. Can you imagine how depressing that must be? And a lot of them are owned by the pension funds. So they're the worst landlords in the universe. And they are actually the people who manage our funds, our pensions. So there's definitely a big noise to be made about that, because we actually were surprised how unified in the awfulness those owners are. And the bigger the shopping center, the worse it performs for them. So when you look at people like Henderson, big funds, they are absolutely clueless. So it's a lot of waste being on, and I think maybe Beacon is the solution. So when we did a bit of digging, we realized that actually when you can show the council that about half of the high street is closed, they can bring planning changes. Councils don't like planning changes, but if they see data, graphs, they understand that. If they see something has been closed for 3 years, it's not going to change. So then you can start acting on changing the planning. So that's more or less where the data comes into it. It doesn't act immediately, but it lets you build up a scenario for your planners to actually have a conversation. And they listened in Tottenham Hale, where they concluded that the high street is just dead there, there's nothing going to happen. So they brought NHS to bring locations like dialysis units and places that people have to go all the time to bring footfall with those units. So that, I think, is probably the most exciting. But when you look at what everybody else is doing, Singapore being a totally military-oriented country which counts everybody and surveillance is everywhere, they actually have very accurate footfall data. So their planning now is planning the retail locations around the footfall. Sorry, I might just make a note. And we started doing it in UK as well. So there is a couple of projects in Camden where I'm based. So we started looking with sensors, can we actually persuade people to solve their parking needs, which are probably the hardest to solve with the growing populations, and look if we can sense the free parking locations slightly further out that they're actually going to. Could we also offer them incentives to park further up, but in exchange for an offer of a discount? And the initial pilot was very successful. So people were like, okay, well, if it's 10 minutes walk, but I do get a voucher for something, I can walk. Obviously, it's not fine for women with 3 small children or with an older person, but there's a lot of people who have a little bit of freedom while walking, and that's beginning to click in. The trial is now in Kentish Town. It's sort of live-ish, but it's I think it's going to be the right way. So when you think about the beacons, it's actually like a quarter of the story, because as Simon was saying, what do they do, who, for, and when? And the advantage of them that they're real time, so you can provide the information real time. There's also a massive project going in at the moment with London taxis, with Proxima and Estimote. So they're exactly that, but not so pretty, just a little bit slightly different design. So the taxi drivers figure out that they're going to probably lose to Uber anyway, so there's no harm in trying crazy stuff. So they just ordered a big pilot with beacons, knowing that if you look at the size of the buildings on the left, they show how many tweets comes from the building. So the height shows how many people are tweeting. That was a lovely project from, from UCL, and we realized that most of the tweets in UK, in London, come from the city. They obviously board trading, so they tweet. Or they tweet insider trading, whatever it is, but they tweet a lot. So the taxis were fairly secure that people have their smartphones on, that they have the location, that they will be using it. So they're doing a big project, I think about 500 to start off with, to provide them travel information, but also a little bit of advertising. So it's a little bit of a give and take. When you look at how people use Twitter, they tend to tweet when they're on their way somewhere. It's kind of like a multitasking activity. So the assumption from the guys from the black cabs is that if they are checking the Facebook, checking the Twitter while they're in the cab, they might be open for notifications about passing by retail. It's a little bit of a long shot, but that's where we are. I also done something which worked quite well in Barbican, which was, again, 80% of information, 20% of advertising. I think that's probably where the proportions are. So we provided information to conference people about a quite complex venue where nobody knew what anything was, which is Barbican. It's a complete labyrinth, and we were advising them in real time what's going on in every of the rooms, updating and providing live chat, while also dropping few notifications about real-time offers for the food, drink, and retail in Barbican. I didn't get thrown out. It was just about acceptable. But we did position it as a pilot, so people knew we were doing that. I think that's very important to actually advise people that these beacons are going in, because if they fall off the ceiling and people don't know what they are, they get very worried. Because they are kind of a little bit difficult to handle. We also did a bit of piece of work in Pizza Hut. I didn't do that project, but we did the research for that, which was quite interesting. It's a company called Sensoro, and they wanted to differentiate between all the other pizza companies. Actually, funny enough, the Chinese are not really into pizza, so I'm not entirely sure if they landed in the right country. But they're trying to use beacons to push notifications about the unusual toppings. So if you are into something really weird and you have your beacon on, there's a chance you will bump into a location that does produce something like suckling pig pizza. Again, early days, but people were very open for it. I think the whole question is what it is, what the notification actually does. We noticed that if it's time-based, if it's notification about the offer which has got time urgency, people respond well. If it's something like, well, you know, whenever you can come and get a discount in a month, people forget. So it needs to be something extremely real-timey to actually make a difference. My favorite one, actually, the Norwegian project with a friend of ours just finished in Norway with Kappa Cinemas. They got together with Coke, which is recovering from a big scandal there. They only just discovered that there's 40 spoons of sugar in each Coke. So the sales fell off the cliff, and they're now just offering free Coke to every Norwegian going. In just trying to persuade them to stay on with the drink. And that was a notification project with additional content. So basically, if you were in the cinema, they would provide some fun stuff, additional stuff about the movie, but also free Coke and also a registration for more free Cokes in the future. And we were watching as the readers like, oh, Coke, no. But extra content for the movie, absolutely yes. So I think it's basically, notifications are just a normal channel to communicate, and the proportions between content and advertising are yet to be discovered, but probably 80-20 you can't go wrong. And talking about Gatwick, because I looked at the brief for the digital catapult, the nice projects which are just kicking off now is, do you know about CETA? Does Gatwick have CETA? Well, anyway, it's a platform for registration of beacons, because the airport's obviously not terribly keen to have these things emitting radio, this and that. It just could be interfering, could be something you don't want there. So they're quite strict of who can produce beacons and what these beacons can do. So there's a platform called CETA, which all the airports are implementing at the moment. So basically to register your beacons and be clarified and licensed to put them on, and use them to provide information. So gate alerts were the biggest. Everybody wanted gate alerts, but also time to boarding from where you are, as opposed to from random locations, which it tends to give you. So very personal, specific information. at the point where you really need them. And they added a little bit of option for retail offers, and again, that composition of inform, entertain. I think CETA is being installed in Heathrow, so if anybody is working on Gatwick project, I'm pretty sure that they are on it, but that's the one to be on if you want to do anything. And just to finish it off, we just finished a project in Greece on, Greece is very hot and also has got a lot of people piling into very, very few parks, so there's a lot of conflict going on. So we did a hackathon thinking that we'll be doing something for the city, ended up to be kind of retail-y, but around parks. And what everybody wanted to do is just to find the nearest place with a shade. It's hard to believe it, but actually Athens is unbelievably hot, and it's extremely unpleasant most of the day until about midnight. So the whole day is spent looking for shady places, which is why they don't do that much work, which is fair enough. We have a problem with umbrella, while they have a problem with extreme heat, and actually just to get through the day is really hard work. So they wanted to do something which would let people, to find oasis, which is not a park because they don't have parks, but a little bit of green land that they could manage as a community themselves. So add few plants, add a couple of grow bags for trees, and just make these community spaces for green. And also communicate and educate to people from outside what's important. So the problem the refugees who are pretty much taking over the parks at the moment is that they don't understand what matters for the locals. So they don't understand that littering is a problem. If they were not littering, they already would be liked by about 50% more. If they understood that certain behaviors are a problem, it would be easier. And you can have a view on it, but basically educating through apps is not a silly idea because it's easy to communicate what matters. And more or less everybody wants to do the right thing. So using the apps for Find My Oasis has got a number of kind of positive functions, but also we built the beacons, obviously, because that's what we're in there for. And we were crowdsourcing the number of people in the area to then help the council to make decision if that area, that square, that green patch merits having the watering pipe, because the water at the moment is very scarce and it's expensive to water. So they only water what they absolutely have to. So we were helping out with putting the beacons to sense how many people were in the area, would it matter watering? If so, how to help the council to actually decide. So I think that's that. I just leave it at that because we're going with the view that this is going to be multilingual communication. Because one thing we notice on this airport, and particularly in the Oxford Street, that people are multilingual. A lot of them don't speak English. It's hard to do it with the beacons, but you can do multilingual notifications. I think that's probably another advantage. It's kind of Google Translate on the go without you having to check up. Am I doing good time? Yeah, so my advice would be go for it, do as much as possible, and I think the beacons will go for a number of iterations, but there's enough there to merit retail interest and merit experimentations, as long as you bear in mind that this is information mainly, advertising partly, and triggering good things in probably 5%. Okay, thank you.